the biggest change was technology. You know, and
So all of the
44
changes
years.
surface level, you think?
Huh?
Surface level change and nothing really.
Well, yeah, things had changed, and when I left society in '69, racism was brutal, up in your face. Now it's kind of like polite. It's got a tie and a suit on, and they use coded words. You know, they used to call us the N word straight out back then. Now, it's you people and them people and circumstances and all kind of coded uh, uh, way of expressing. And Robin and I talk about it a lot. A lot of white Americans, they're not even aware of what skin privilege means. They're not even aware of something they may think is okay, that it's offensive or insensitive to African American people. They're not racist, but they're guilty of not really understanding what it is to be African American in this country.
Some years later, but to answer your some of your questions about whether or not the celebration will take place. You said you had talked with some folks, and your initial question was whether or not we would be a part of that celebration. Yes, we are. We will be a part of it, but there's a distinction between the anniversary of the Black Panther Party national alumni than the one that happened here in New Orleans,
Louisiana,
which Arisa spoke about. They'll celebrate that particular one, which would be 50 years coming October. That is the proposed date they want to celebrate that particular thing. So yes, we support that, Albert and I. And even though, like Albert alluded to earlier, we weren't members in that particular group, we became members of the Louisiana chapter of the Black Panther Party, and subsequently NOLA as well, but we did not take part in any shootout. We became members of the Black Panther Party.
We were in prison when the shootout happened.
When did you go to prison? When can you tell us?
For me, '69, on an armed robbery charge.
Okay.
And I was sentenced to 50 years. And I was about 21, 22 at the time. And I couldn't even begin the thing. But I was always studious for the wrong reasons. So I had already plotted my escape. And God, Manny Meany, who's dead now, he brought a gun up there.
I remember.
And hid it in the bedroom.
I do remember.
Yeah, and so when we was in the courtroom before we went in there, I went in the bedroom and got the gun and stuff.
You wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, I have quite a history,
I'm learning.
Yeah. And I escaped the day I was sentenced to 50 years.
What year was that?
69. I think around June, July, somewhere.
When were you caught?
I got caught in New York several weeks later. And that's when I first became affiliated. There was an awareness of the party.
Yeah.
But as I said, I was just a petty street kid, surviving off of petty crimes and stuff like that, And but I was housed in the infamous Manhattan House of Detention, the Tombs. And they had the Panther 21 shootout around that time.
I just finished the book Panther Baby.
Yeah, and so 4 of the members from that group were housed, and I was on the 8th floor. And the guy that was in leadership position with the party, and his name was Alfred King. And these brothers come on the tier. In the prison culture, you expect a certain way things conducted. You come on the tier, and everybody, if you've been to prison before, you understand prison culture and stuff. It's much easier. But everybody's probing and for their weakness, what's something they can exploit in some kind of way and stuff. But like these brothers came on and cheer, you know, and they went to introducing themselves to everyone and talking about the party and stuff, you know. And you know, I was listening what they were saying, but I wasn't hearing it. And then a guy came now from Denimora, it's a prison in upstate New York, and he was my cellmate, and he had a book called A Different Drummer.
Different drummer.
Yeah, by William Riley Kelly, and he, you know, I mean, back then with me, you know, it was all like mostly everything in prison is mostly image up front. You know, how you present yourself depends on, you know, how you survive. Whether you got a easy survival or you got to really, you know, put up with a lot of stuff. And so, you know, I imagine he, you know, I never, you know, really can say for sure, but I do imagine why he gave me that book. You know, he just told me, you know, after he come in the cell and we talked and introduced, you know, ourselves to each other and stuff. And the next day, you know, he says, I have something I want you to read, you know. He said, can you read? I was like, yeah, I can read, you know. And he gave me this book called A Different Drummer. It was a fictional piece, but it was based upon true facts. The great migration of African Americans from the southern part of the United States, southern states, to, you know, west, north, east, and with the belief of the promised land, you know, that held the promised land, you know, and but the thing I learned from the book is that, you know, one person can make a difference if he's willing to sacrifice, compromise, even if necessary, his life, which you know our comrade Herman Wallace did. You can make changes. You can cause change in society, you know. And so after reading that book, and I started going to the Panthers meetings, used to hold meetings every day. Yeah, in the tombs, yeah.
In the tombs. And where are you at this point?
At this point, I'm probably in Angola. There were different periods, though. You know, I first went to Angola in 1961,
Okay.
and I had a 10-year
So you were
sentence.
so that was a couple of years.
About
Well,
8 years,
Robert
8, 9
and
years
I
apart,
met.
something like that.
We were housed in the same dorm, a dormitory called Cypress One. You know,
Now,
I
how
mean,
does that-
neither one of us
Well, go ahead.
had a political level of kind.
At that time, no, neither one of us.
Yeah.
He was a young man, I was a young
I
man.
was
He was
wild
about
and-
17, 18 at the
Yeah,
time.
I'd embraced the culture of the street, and you know,
And I was 21, I think.
yeah.
Something like that.
So you guys were on two different wavelengths, but you finally meet up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, you're correct. I'm saying you're correct. We were on two different wavelengths, and I see where you're going. We finally met up some years later in a prison in which he alluded to after escaping and so forth, becoming politicized. And it seemed as if the same thing happened to me. We just was in different places at different times, but different things were happening that was having the same maybe psychological impact upon both of us to embrace. And
So
we met.
So joining the Panthers, and I've read about some of this, but I just want you to all talk about it on camera. When that happened for you all in Angola?
Well, you know, until you know Robert won his freedom and I won our experiences with the Panthers, joining the party and everything, were all in prison. You know, we formed the only prison chapter, recognized chapter by the Black Panther Party Central Committee. You know, in the United States. You know, it was a prison branch, and so we were expected to uphold the principles of the party, and we were expected to, you know, the term they used to use then, organize, agitate, you know, make change, you know. And so we did that within the environment and the institution and the culture we was exposed to.
How did that start? I mean, as far as you joining, what changes, what things did you do
Well, my first exposure to the party, as I say, was in New York. I was in the Tombs during the time of the first riots and the Attica massacre and stuff, you know, and being on the eighth floor where Alfred came, and I can't even remember the other three brothers. So I was actively involved in the uprising and stuff. So back during that time, any what they could call militant action, you automatically was considered Black Panther. Even though I had been associated with Alfred Kane and the other Panthers, and so when I got back to New Orleans, eventually I lost my expedition hearing, and so when I got back to New Orleans, Malik and all of them, they had turned C1 into a cheer for the House of Panthers.
What year was that?
New Orleans Prison.
Yeah, around. I came back, I think, around 71.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 71, and they had turned. What do you mean they turned it?
Well, only Panthers was allowed housed on that tier, and they had sealed all the windows up with steel plates, and you had about I don't know 8, 9 Panthers
Yes.
on a tier, that was meant for. You had 15 cells on each tier, day room, and bunks for 4 men in each cell, but they only had about 8 or 9. Otherwise, we weren't allowed to come in contact with any of the other prisoners and stuff like it. It didn't stop us,
Yeah.
because, they were saying where there's a will, there's a way. So, we still was able to communicate out the window with guys when they come on the yard, or we call them kites, sending letters back and forth and stuff like it there, And so while I was on that tier, brother in the leadership name was Scott.
Charles Scott.
Charles Scott.
Chucky.
Yeah. Me and him sat down one day, and he asked me, "Where are you going with this?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. I just know, these people been, excuse my language, fucking over us for so long. We got to start fighting back and all." And he said, "Well, and that's one of the things I find so unique about the party. He's like, well, you ever thought about joining the party?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, but I'm in prison, And he's like, "It don't matter." That time, the party used to refer to what we call, hustlers, petty criminals, and lumping proletariats, people who had been disenfranchised by American society because of the racist economic policies and political policies and social policies. And so, the only way they know how to survive was, victimizing one another, And so I'm like, "Man, I can't join the party I'm in." He said, "Why you can't join the party?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in prison." He said, that's not an obstacle, that's an excuse. He said, I can send you papers in, So that's what he did. He sent my name in the Central Committee.
So where were you at this time?
I most likely was in the New Orleans Parish Prison, and I met Chucky at the time as well. I was being held on the 5th floor at the time when I first came in contact with the party being in a shootout. I had escaped. I was on the 5th floor. I had a previous charge, and like Albert,
Is the 5th floor something?
I was being held on the 5th floor. That used to be the death chamber, but it turned out to be maximum security in the New Orleans Parish Prison, and they had about 4 or 5 cells up there. So I was being held in a
early
cell.
version of CCR, ICE solitary.
And they used to hang people from there. I mean, at the time, then the electric chair was at one time. They still had the
Before they
hole in the
had the
floor on the
electric
5th
chair,
floor where they
yeah.
used to drop the noose years ago, but that is another story. But anyway, I was being held on that particular floor because I had escaped. And this is when I came into contact with the Black Panther Party, because there was a television on the tier, even though there were bars and mesh wire. It was there mostly for the guard, and I was able to see. At that time, mice was on the till at that time, too. They call it mice, walimo. Because anyway, they interrupted the regular movie set, saying that something was going on in the night ward, that militant was shooting it out with, with police and so forth. And I was trying to, only thing I was trying to do, I knew I had been innocent of a charge that I had been convicted for, and he was giving me 35 years, and the only thing I wanted to do was try to escape again. And if I'd had an opportunity to escape, I would have escaped, because by this time now I had begun to feel that there was something drastically wrong with the system, and there was one way to do. I didn't know anything about Harriet Tubman, Denmark Vesey, Gary Prosser, or other people who at one time, fought against this type of thing, and I began to look at things from a total different view. I began to see some things as the whole, wait a minute, do we hold these rights to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by whomever it is, with certain inalienable right and all this, and I began to question these things, and so my mind, was right. So when the Black Panther Party came along, even before they came, I escaped from New Orleans Parish Prison. And so I met those brothers. I met Charles. He was he was down below. Like I said, they had on the window, like Albert pointed out, they had fenced it in and put all kind of, steel plates on the ball to keep the guys from communicating. But he managed to communicate, because when they brought us on the yard, they subsequently sent me from the 5th floor back on the 3rd floor. And they sent me on the yard, and this is when I met Chucky, I met Scotty, and we began to talk. But my point that I really want to make is that, yeah, I did join the Black Panther Party, but at this time, I had learned a lot about America. I just couldn't put it in context, and the Black Panther Party was able to put it in context with the 10-point platform program. They identified some things that I wasn't able to identify. But I joined mostly the struggle. It was a struggle. I think it was the thing that, even though the 10-point platform is, was beautiful, and it still is beautiful, and it's something that people should embrace, because we do want an immediate end to police brutality in the community. We want land-free, land, clothes, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. We still want all of this, but at the same time, we want our dignity. We want to be free people. We understand that we were slaves. The Constitution did not eliminate chattel. It eliminated rather chattel, but it did not eliminate corporate slavery, enslaved, slavery, or whatever you want to. And child slavery in a form. Economic slavery. I mean, we could just go on and on and on with the chain of negativity that it bringing. Then we were denied certain things, even though we were said that we were free, but really we weren't free. We were saying that we were free, but we were still being held in chain, because there was a whole, even though there was a certain economic group that controlled all of America, there was another America was insulated by another group of people who had been brainwashed into believing that they were free, that they were superior, to a whole lot of other people. You had many poor whites who were living in places, I mean, worse than some of the black slaves were living, who really believed that they were better. And what they did, they took refuge in racism. In other words, many of them may not embrace and actively became racist, but they took refuge in the fact that they lived in a racist system that allowed them to be racist. And they put people in a position to feel inferior, telling them that they were out of slavery, and at the same time keeping them in abject poverty and slavery. And the mixed emotion, the stuff that come with that, caused all kind of confusion through the years. And so these are the type of things that I was thinking about. I had begun to read certain books. I had begun to do some thinking. And otherwise, if I had never liberated my mind, I wouldn't have never tried to escape. And I'm going to tell you something, man. That was the best feeling I had in the world. See, when I escaped out that New Orleans Parish Prison, and nobody got hurt, we wasn't trying to hurt anybody. I was just trying to escape. When I escaped, I felt so totally liberated. I have never felt a feeling like that in my life, man. That was right there on Broad, Tulane and Broad. When I jumped over that wall and jumped by that wall and ran toward Cornell Street for freedom, because I felt this, and I was convinced that I was escaping slavery, and I was not escaping justice. Justice had escaped me. All of this was prior to my joining the party.
Your mindsets, both of your mindsets, were already changing, and you were learning more about the system that you were a part of and have been manipulated by.
You know, well, my mindset, like I say, who wasn't aware of the Black Panther Party in 1966? They kind of like exploded on the world, you know. But I never had any, you know, up close encounter. Didn't know anything, you know. My level of conscience was the street, not political. And so my up close and personal contact with the party came in the 70s when I was in Manhattan House of Detention after the Panther 21 shootout. And they put 4 of the Panther brothers on the floor I was on.
So can you tell me about, you were both in Orleans Parish Prison. You saw that the shootout was happening in the Ninth Ward.
I was in New York.
You were still in New York.
I was in New Orleans on the 5th floor.
You were on the 5th floor and you saw the shootout had happened.
I saw it through a screen in the television.
And then you eventually escaped outside.
No, I had escaped already.
And
I was being held there as a result of the reason I had escaped. They placed me on the 5th floor.
Can you tell us about your interaction with the Panthers when they arrived to the prison where you were?
Well, they were already there when I was extradited back from New York. As I say, there was a tier it's called C1. You know, like C1, C2, C3, like it there. But this tier had been labeled by the administration as a militant tier, Black Panther tier. They even had a handwritten sign at the front of the tier, you know, danger, Panthers, militants, stuff like it there, you know, for any security guard, because they always change. You don't have the same security guard working, same drop all the time. So this was like for whatever security guard was working that tier for the first time, you know. And
once you guys first became part of the Louisiana chapter here, what was that? Can you tell us kind of inside the prison system? We know what they did outside of the system, but being incarcerated and bringing this mindset, this thinking with you where you were, how did you change what was happening around you, change mindsets?
Well, what happened is, when we went to prison, or when they sent us to prison, we began, like Albert pointed out, doing things to kind of effect some changes, to change some law. But the main idea was to get out of prison. And we began doing things in prison, you know, organizing, and as Albert usually points out, we began teaching guys, you know, different things. Eventually, we ended up on the same tier, because when I got time for the crime in which I was charged with, and including escape, and they sent me to Angola, and they ended up sending me to Angola on a tier with Albert and Herman.
For murder that happened.
For murder that
you wasn't
happened
even in the prison.
So, but the fact that I was a black, you know, member of the Black Panther Party, or alleged to be a member of the Black Panther Party, that's why they placed me on a tier with Herman and Albert. And so what happened is we got together, and once we got after they placed us on that tier, but they separated us eventually, but during the time that we were on a tier with each other, we got together and we were able to communicate with Herman on another tier. Herman also had been on C1 with Albert on a Panther tier, Herman Wallace. But what happened was, actually I met Ronnie Ellsworth. You know, he was the first Panther, known Panther that I met. I met him because I was being held in a federal building. He was being held in a federal building. I met Ron Ellsworth. And then Malik was a part of, Malik Rahim, he was also a part of the people who brought attention to our case after hearing about our case sometime. And then Colonel Bowe, which was another, he wasn't a member of the Black Panther Party, but he was from California at the time, and he brought our case to California. And like, we were doing things, and we was filing writs and what's not, and so people attract attention. We had an article on us in Angolite, known as the plaintiff, that we were there for.
I mean, like you plant a flower.
Yeah, like you plant somebody, because we weren't ever going anywhere. This is why they entitled that deal. But in any event, from that particular deal, Bo got out, Malik read about it, Malik brought it to some people, and Marina Drummer got on board for some reason. Scott, she knew a young lawyer, Scott Fleming,
Scott Fleming.
who
He was a law
took it.
student
He
at
was
the
a law
time.
student at the time, and he took the case. Herman Herman Wallace, he took the case and disseminated about throughout that there were 3 men, you know, being held unjustly. He believed that they were innocent, and this is how we got some attention. We got people to do regional work. We got people to do community work, and then we got people like Larissa who heard about it and then written about it and then brought a whole lot of attention to it, by which it was being hidden. Because a lot of people didn't know there was a shootout here in New Orleans, but even a lot of black students in certain schools did not even know that this had taken place.
No.
And this was recent. This wasn't anything, you know, that had happened eons ago. But Orissa brought it back to surface. And with all of this,
People didn't know.
I have no idea.
Systemic
People forget.
racism, the education.
They suppress it. They somehow suppress
Yeah,
it.
they never-
Self-suppression.
I didn't realize that we had a history, like I said, until after I joined the party, and certain books were required to read, you know. And like I said, imagine my surprise, you know, when I read about Harriet Tubman and unbelievable things she accomplished and did, you know, enduring child slavery and the risks she took, you know. Sojourner Truth, who traveled around the South preaching, you know, against slavery. You know, Denmark Visa, Gabriel Prowser, you know, Nate Turner, you know, I mean, I had never even heard of these people, you know.
Really?
No, they didn't teach that in school.
Yeah.
Black history in American educational system now is shit. So imagine what it was like back then, you know.
Yeah.
So.
So if you all, of course, at this point, you all are in Angola together, and you've become official members of the Black Panther Party. Can you just take me through the steps? If I know that you were unjustly put in solitary, can you just take us through the steps of what was going on prior to that, the days before all of that started to happen?
Well, Herman and I were in Angola. Robert was being held still in Orleans somewhere.
Orleans, probably.
And so while Robert was organizing, you know, we use the term raising people level of conscience. You know, like I say, you don't know something is wrong until you know your moral compass has been raised to the point where, you know, what may have been acceptable at a time in your life is no longer acceptable. So we were, you know, Robert in New Orleans and me and Herman in Angola, we were, you know, organizing against, you know, racism, brutality, murder, prisoner murder, corruption, administration corruption. At that time, they had no blacks working in Angola, but they had this brutal system of inmate guards, you know, whites for white, Angola was segregated then, and blacks for blacks, you know, and the only criteria was, you was gonna be there, you had a life sentence or 1,100 years or something, you was gonna be there, and so the turnover, you know, wouldn't be constant, you know, whoever they made a inmate guard, and inmate guards at that time were virtually had the same authority as they used to use the term free man for security people at Angola at the time, you know. And so, you know, we were busy organizing in a population until the Brent Miller murder, which we were framed, Herman and I were framed for.
Yeah.
And you know, and Robert was in things, so Brent Miller was found stabbed to death April 17, 1972. I was the first one they picked up for investigation, and they marched me in front of the whole prison population, you know, under gun. And so a lot of prisoners, you know, way prison culture is use this opportunity to sell those scores or to gain favors and whatever, you know. And so I stayed in a dungeon overnight. Some of the Miller brothers came, and they wanted to, you know, I was in the shower. You know, those cell blocks. I was in the shower. They had me isolated from the rest of the guys in the dungeon. And I was in the shower, and they come in there, and they were cursing me and threatening me and stuff, and telling me to come to the bars, you know, as though I was mentally retarded. I was gonna walk up to the bars, you know, with it. And so, you know, I backed up all the way in the shower, so they couldn't reach me or anything, you know. And they threatened me and stuff. And at one time, I thought they were actually going to get in the cell, you know. And it's hard but I thought I was going to die. And in hindsight, I wasn't afraid. I didn't realize that until later, you know. Had conditioned, you know, my mind and stuff that when they come through that door, you know, I was just going to start fighting until they kill me. And I remember this tremendous fear, you know. And I remember my knees and legs shaking, you know, but outwardly, I didn't, you know, I didn't want them to see this fear that, you know. And then somewhere, you know, in the mystery of life, you know, this calm came over me and like, this is what you believe in, this is what you fight for, this is what you die for, you know. But the guy that was working the tier, they was like, open the shower, you know. And he like, I'm not opening the shower, you know, the warden already called him, blah, blah, blah. But he said, here, if you want the keys and you want to open it, I'm gonna leave the keys in the lockbox, you know. And he I can hear him when the keys hit, and he left. But before when they was going to get the keys to open up the shower, some of what we call rank, you know, the majors, colonel, well, they didn't have majors and captains, colonel. They had one colonel, and you know, we could hear him coming up, and they were like, what the hell y'all doing up there, blah, 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 you know, and made them leave, you know. And so the next day, April 18th, I was transferred from the dungeon to where I spent the next 44 years and 10 months, which is CCR. It's a building at the front of Angola, if you ever seen pictures. It's a big white building. That's where they used to house a solitary and death row at the time. So I went in solitary April 18th, 1972, and I didn't get out until my freedom in 60, you know, February, on my birthday, February 19, 2016. You know?
I mean, I just can't believe that.
Well, sometimes I have trouble believing it, you know. And it's one of the most difficult questions I imagine for Robert as well.
Yeah.
People want to know how we did it, you know.
And you
Yeah, I mean, I think the preparation and the awakening, the awareness, you know, that we went through gave us a foundation. You know, knowledge is a very great weapon, because if you have knowledge of something, then you can do certain things to change the course or whatever. And the fact that we had been politicized, as Robert has said when we go on speaking engagement, we understood what was going on. You know,
do you think you would have both been able to survive that had you not had a change in mindset?
No, at least, well, I can't speak for that, but let us speak for yourself.
No,
I know I would
thing,
not
you know.
have survived.
No.
No, and don't get me wrong. I really wasn't trying to survive. I'd done some things, but I wasn't too much trying to survive. I was trying to get out by any means necessary. Not that I was going to do anything. When I say any mean that I would, the mean that would accomplish what I was trying to achieve. And I was going to use every ounce of energy and strength that I had in my body to do this with. It didn't mean that I would become violent or anything like that, but I would be violently involved with trying to do something. I knew I could not get out legally, so I had to challenge legality on a moral plane, and that's what we began to do. We challenged the legal system from a moral standpoint because we showed that the system had failed, not just us, but so many other people. And it was, history was replete with cases like ours, that people had did 40, 50 years, and then they turned that they were, innocent after a while. So, yeah, it was an experience.
When you look back at, just the impact that the Panthers have had on America in the short time that they were an organized group, and looking at what's happening in our country today, after the murders of George Floyd and so many black men and black women in our country, you said that you feel like the change is not. Some people feel like there's been progress, maybe you feel like it's not.
Well, yeah, I'm right now. I'm optimistically hopeful because you have, first of all, Robert and I have embraced and preached the Black Lives Matter movement when the whole of
Before it was the same.
yeah, when that America
Harriet
was
Tubman did it
rejecting
when she brought the first slave.
The world was rejecting it, and right now, Robin and I, we've talked about this. We both agree right now that Black Lives Matter was the most promising movement, and the fact what's going on in the world right now is bad that to be true. But we a long time ago, we've met with Black Lives Matter
In England and Sweden and different other places. Yeah.
Most people don't know that a lot of those protests that's going on over there in Europe now are being headed by Black Lives Movement. But Robert and I in America, we've made it a point wherever we go to speak to find out if there are a Black Lives Matter movement there, and ask whoever the organizers to bring us to meet with them, and share experiences and stuff with them, So.
Do you think that, I know that I've talked to some other members of the Louisiana chapter of the Panthers, and they said that there is there's a new Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people they say we don't necessarily affiliate ourselves with that, but, so not necessarily focusing on them, but are we seeing some of the same principles and points that you all learned being applied with this Black Lives Matter movement, with the movement that we're seeing right now?
Well, Robert has a saying that I'm very fond of. He talk when we talking to wherever we at. He says, he talks about people throwing pebbles in a pond, and if you throw enough pebbles, you create a wave. And if you keep throwing pebbles, that wave becomes a tsunami. And tsunami is a force for change. Now, whether that change is destructive or constructive depends upon the level of conscience of the people who are affected by it. So while we may not, I've talked with them enough. While we may not agree with their methods and stuff, they throwing pebbles,
And the pebbles are getting the ripples, and the ripples are getting the waves, and the waves tsunami. And that's the level of consciousness with people. And this is what's going on with it. So the Black Lives Matter is just a continuation of a wave, that's spreading and constantly spreading. And this is what and I think this is the accomplishment. This is some accomplishment that we've seen in this. And not to take anything, but black lives have always mattered, and black lives will always matter, and there will always be people, and there have been people who love justice have been fighting for black lives. So, and that will always continue.
So do you think that we would be at this point? Do you think we would even think the way that we think if had it not been for the Black Panthers in this country?
No.
Well, before the Black Panthers, you had the Deacons and various other.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. You know, for whatever reason or in the mystery of life, the Panthers were chosen
Malcolm.
at the right time. The Panthers came into existence at the right time. But they were not the beginning of the journey. They were the continuation of the journey. And right now we see Black Lives Matter as the most promising movement in the world. Not just, you know, I mean, Black Lives Matter is worldwide now.
Yeah.
You know. And but you know, before the Black Panther Party, I mean, like I said, the original Wonder Woman was, you know, Harriet Tubman. You know, but how many people, you know, people just finding out about Harriet Tubman, you know. They're getting the pasteurized version of her, but still, you know.
So, and this is a final question for y'all. What do you think needs to happen in our country in order for us to see viable change in the way that this country is run, in the way black people are treated, and in order for us to create some progress, some actual progress, and not things that are just surface level or, you know, performative?
Well, for me, I think the distribution of wealth. The distribution of wealth in this world, in particular, America, is so obscene, you know. Of course, the distribution of wealth means the distribution of the economic system, you know. You know, you got various economic systems. You know, you got Marxism, socialism, capitalism, venture capitalism, etc. But the distribution of wealth, irregardless of what type of economic system, and the economics is the foundation of society. From economics, you know, political institutions, cultural institutions, judicial institutions, you know, are developed. And so I think the distribution of wealth is the foundation for change of everything in society, and you know.
Yeah, I imagine there's a number of things, and I totally agree with Albert. The redistribution of wealth probably would play a great part, but I think re-education would also, you know, there's a book was written, you know, and I don't even like using the term, you know, re-education of the Negro, because I don't even, like I said, I just use the word in quotation. I don't embrace it at all.
Yeah.
But the re-education of the Negro, but there also have to be a re-education of white people. They were ignorantly taught to believe that a whole people who were the foundation, you know, of civilization were inadequate. They were imbecile.
Yeah.
That they were nothing, you know. And they have to understand this, that the creation of life can't be relegated to nothing. I mean, the creation of life is the reason why the world exists these days. And so I think people have to be re-educated to this as to who and what and where and how we got here. You know, who we are, you know, where we are now and how we got here. But I think that re-education of white people has to be part of it. And don't get me wrong, there are many whites I've met. All whites, there are some, you know, people who believe that all whites are racist. I don't quite accept that term. You know, I think whites may have embraced the system, you know, and there are systemic racism, but individual race, I could never ever believe that, because I've met too many white people who embrace black people.
Well,
but they embrace a system that is racist, and they come compliant when they don't say anything, when they don't speak about the injustices that taken place, because and I imagine they've been conditioned not to do so simply because they will lose their spot. We have been conditioned, to live in a society where money or profit means one thing, over another, and so people elect, wrongdoing over doing right. They rather to embrace, something like that, and that's what we have to do. But again, I think re-education of whites, has to be taught. They have to realize this, and they, like I say, they have organizations undoing racism. But if a racism is a learned reflex, and it can be unlearned, and so whites have to unlearn racism, and they have to undo the damage of racism, just like blacks have to undo the damage of submission to racism, and embrace that attitude that, that, hey, I belong here too. And we have to act like it. But the other side have to give us, the right, the same right that they have to be here.
It's strange. I was talking with somebody, I forget exactly where it was, and I said, I find it strange that I'm fighting for constitutional rights, and I've never had the benefit of it. I'm 73 years old now. I've never had the benefit of the protection of the Constitution. So when the Constitution was drawn together, the founding fathers, as they are so romantically referred to as all of them were slave owners. They all committed atrocities against the African people. Their mindset and everything. The Constitution had nothing to do with us as a people. We were considered less or the same as child slavery during the time that the Bill of Rights of the Constitution was put together. And some of the founding fathers, as they are referred to, but African Americans, we've been in a survival mode since 1619 when the first slaves were brought to this country. And we have to move beyond survival mode. And what I mean by that, my biggest personal, and this is a personal fear, with African Americans is we forgive too easily and we forget too quickly. And we suffer the fools, And we've got to stop that. We've got to let, and I want to make sure what I'm saying is clear. Black Lives Matter. It has to be more than a symbol. It has to be from the bottom of our soul, embracement. And so while right now we're in a position where forces from 1619 to now, all the blood, the sweat, the tears, the sacrifices, the debts, it at a pivotal point where real meaningful change can happen, in this country and in the world. But not if we continue to stay in a survival mode. We have to move beyond the survival mode. We are famous for taking dehumanizing, degrading, oppressive treatment and developing mechanisms to survive it or to put a positive spin on it, And we've got to move beyond that, We've got to let the world know if you harm us, we're not going to forget, and we damn sure may never forgive, And especially amongst ourselves. I know a lot of people may interpret that in a negative way, but what comes to mind, and I usually don't get, but this fool Kanye West right now, and what he's doing to African America, the image of African American, the struggles of African Americans right now, But people still buying his records. They're still buying. They're giving him the wealth to do what he is doing right now. we've got to create a movement in this country where when you do stuff like that to us, you may have sold 1 million records today, but tomorrow you will not sell one record. And until we take that mindset, until we develop a movement that your wealth does not entitle you to treat us any way you want. That if you treat us in a disrespectful, dishonorable way, that there are going to be repercussions from us. You know, and I think, you know, until we don't, I don't think we have that kind of movement yet. I think there are a lot of brothers and sisters working toward that kind of movement, but, you know.
But when you describe the way your thought process was before, well, even before joining the Panthers, I can see this trend where you do have young men who they haven't reached that level of consciousness yet, but I think that this movement is starting to open their eyes. We just did a story recently about the talk, and one of the young men that we interviewed said, you know, what's really interesting is I grew up in the project, grew up in this community all my life, but because you know, I felt like I wasn't necessarily affected, you know, it didn't bother me. You knew.
Same way with me.
Yeah.
If it didn't affect me personally, it didn't matter.
Yeah. So, but it wasn't until you were personally targeted, and then you realized, wait, that this could happen to me, and this could change my life. And so he's developing a level of consciousness where he feels.
Yeah, that's what I, you know, Robin and I talking about earlier. You have, when you you know, I truly believe that in life, maybe once or many times, an individual or situation raises your level of consciousness. So once you become aware, then the burden shifts from what the system is doing to you. How are you going to react to it? Are you going to make an excuse for it, or are you going to change it? You know, one of my pet peeves is the N-word. What it is about this word that has so much power over us as a people that we can't kill it, you know? We can't bury it and move on. You know, there are so many other expressions we can use to describe ourselves. You know, but we glorize it, we glamorize it, you know. And I remember when I defeated that word, I was, you know, a guy had threw some waste in myself. And I was so enraged, you know. That's how they used to fight in Angola.
Fighting Angola,
you know.
in themselves.
Yeah,
Waste.
yeah, their own human waste.
Common.
That's what men were being reduced to because of the culture and the treatment. So, you know, Robert and Herman and I, we had to fight against that, you know. And we made a lot of inroads and headway with guys, you know. But that's what they had been reduced to. And, you know, so, you know, that's basically what we trying to do now. We're trying to raise the level of create a better humanity, a better society. I got 4 beautiful great-grandkids. And I would hate this 30 years from now, they fighting the same battle.